Hello everyone, Firecrest Gaming here and welcome back to another video, and it's probably going to be one of the last videos I'm going to make this year, and it is the top 10 games that I have played in 2017. So, just the main one rule this time, and the fact that the game had to be released within 2017, so it's not like the list I did last year when I just ranked the games that I played in 2016. Other than that, let's move it on to both the honourable and the dishonourable mentions. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Amazing game, amazing universe, and an amazing introduction into the Zelda universe, but I didn't really play on my Nintendo Switch that much, and I couldn't justify putting it or any Switch game on the list. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Super Mario Odyssey, see the Switch. Dirt 4, a fantastic game overall, great handling, great cars, but I just feel as though there wasn't enough to put it on the list, and I feel like other games just had a bit more content and a bit more depth to them. Dark Souls 3 The Ring City, a fantastic send-off to the Souls series for content-wise, some of the best bosses the series has ever given birth to, some of the most gorgeous locales, and some of the deepest lore, and answering some of the most basic questions that we've had through the Souls series for a while. But it's an expansion, and I feel as though it wasn't fair to for this to take a slot on the list for it just to be an expansion. You have no idea how much that hurts to say and have to do. The Crash Bandicoot N. Sane Trilogy. A fantastic free games for an already discounted price, which at this point you're probably going to find even cheaper. It's a fantastic game overall, but it's a little bit... I don't know, it didn't quite fit my taste. So, sorry for that, but Crash, can you finish this one off for us? Gran Turismo Sport, the very first Gran Turismo to make its way onto the PS4, and it's definitely very good. It has that proper Gran Turismo feel in its handling. It's a decent selection of cars, I guess. There's not that many, but the ones that are, they're pretty good. And I guess the AI are actually pretty good as well. So what lands it off the list, you might be saying? There's no single-player campaign! Seriously, that's the one big thing of Gran Turismo. Whether you're doing A-Spec or B-Spec, which, if you don't know what that is, Google it on your own time. That is one of the biggest points of Gran Turismo. And it's missing. And you can't say they haven't had long to prepare this, because the last game they had was Gran Turismo 6 in 2013, I believe it was. Well, obviously that year, the PlayStation 4 came out. They have had 4 years in between the last game and this one, and there's no campaign. Star Wars Battlefront 2. An alright campaign, I guess, but overall some terrible decisions within the marketing itself, within the business decisions made by EA, and overall, it's just... there's just nothing interesting to it, to be honest. There's nothing I can find in this game that makes me go, wow! Other than maybe some of the graphics, but... I mean, it's just... no. I'll pass. And Forza Motorsport 7. Okay, I know I liked this game when it came out, but just a couple of things here. One, every game goes through that. Every game goes through the recently released honeymoon period, if you will. You love it for a while, and then you realise that this game continuously doesn't innovate, doesn't decide to change anything, and just is so horribly just uninnovative when you have Need for Speed Payback. As much as, well, maybe that's not doing groundbreaking innovation, it's at least trying. The best way I can put it is Forza continues to not innovate on a formula that it thinks is winning and is solid, but you can't keep doing it year on year on year and expect people to keep on giving the game good reviews and buying the games. While other racing games like F1 2017 and Need for Speed Payback have tried something. They try to keep pushing, even if it's something they've already added, or it's not groundbreaking, but they are actually trying to put something into it. And now, with the bad games out of the way, let's move on to the list. At number 10 is the game that probably surprised me the most this year, and that is Call of Duty World War II. Considering that both Infinite Warfare and COD 4 Remastered were at the bottom of my list when I ranked the games that I played in 2016, minor shout out to that if you want to go watch it. It's a bit pointless now, but there you go. However, this year they came back with a very good game. Now, as far as I'm able to tell, this game has been polarising. Some people love it, some people hate it. It kind of, for me though, is ended up at number 10 on the list, so you know where I stand on it. It goes away from the futuristic style that was going on to Advanced Warfare, and that seemed to be the biggest pull of this game. but it's hard to ignore that it had a massive influence from Battlefield 1. And I've got to say, one of the biggest things that I did love about this game is the campaign, which, like the game itself, is very polarising. But from the side of it, the gameplay is alright, I think, apart from a few stupid spawns and annoying one-shot sections. Oh yeah, one of the things that I definitely liked about this game is the health system. You no longer just do that like you do online. You shoot, move up, wait, and wait for your health to regenerate. Because this time, at least in single player, you get a health bar instead. And you have to find health pickups from the enemies that drop them. But your main source is going to be from one of the main soldiers around you, and that is Zussman. And you also get these abilities from other. You also get many of abilities from other people, like Turner giving you ammo, Pearson pointing out the enemy locations, and other people just doing so many good abilities for you. And it just brings up so much more of a tactical side to it. Aside from that, also, I think the levels are a bit better made as well. I don't know, just everything feels much more well-made, well-crafted in this game, I think is the way I'm trying to put it. And then the campaign itself, I guess, is good. I mean, there's definitely, it has its moments with the mystery behind Pearson, with who he was, why he is like he is, eventually leading up to Turner's death, spoilers, and it's seeing the effect that it has on Pearson. But also a lot of the other points of the game, seeing that your main character Daniel, seeing his brother Paul die, Zussman's capture, and one of my personal favourite moments, which I'm not going to spoil here, is the final part of the game after the bridge. It seriously, it's such a different pace from the rest of the game, and is something that you should have a look at. And there's going to be all those people who are just kind of, well, I think you'll find that all these historical things are wrong. Shut up! It's Call of Duty! Since when has Call of Duty ever tried to get the realistic side of things and get it fully, in there and realistic? If you want that, Battlefield's over there, and there's probably another one in production right now. Aside from the multiplayer, I guess it's alright. I think I've had a bit of fun with it this year. Somehow, I think I'm a lot better at this one than the others, but it still has the loot box system that the previous Call of Duty had, which is annoying. But I'd say there is one good side thing, and that is the orders system, which allows you to get free loot boxes by completing objectives. And so far, the only things that I have seen in these boxes have been cosmetic. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so far I don't think it has too much of an effect on the game, and it keeps it relatively fair. But honestly, in conclusion, this is a very solid game and a welcome improvement from this time 12 months ago. Okay, for the purposes of this one, can we not use the game's title as a joke? The game itself uses it too much, and I'm pretty sure many other people will as well for a cheap joke. So let's just move on from that. So at number 9 is South Park TFBW. You know the title. This game is the sequel to the 2014 game South Park: The Stick of Truth. And I've got to say, I love both of the games. I'm not sure which one I love more. Stick of Truth has a bit more, I don't know, it feels more South Park-like. The humour's a lot darker and a lot just outright more disgusting. There seems to be no limits on what they put in. But the combat was a little bit easy, I'd say, when you got to the end game. There was some overpowered weapons and some overpowered combinations you could use. In this game, I'm sure there is some, but I haven't been able to find them. And the combat is a lot more clever in the way that you use all the characters, and the fact that instead of just being turn-based combat, it is now turn-based combat while on a grid square, so you have to position all your characters in the right position. And while the humour, I guess, is still there, it just feels so much more toned down, so much more safer than it does in The Stick of Truth.
And do nothing while you insult this man's ethnicity.
I wasn't insulting him.
Excuse me. Did you or did you not say that this man seemed tired?
Yes, he's my friend. I said, Paulo, you look tired.
Microaggression! Persons of Hispanic backgrounds have been stereotyped as being sleepy, and saying they look tired is a microaggression that will not stand.
But I am tired.
It just feels like... I'm not saying this game is perfectly child-friendly and ad-friendly, but... It's definitely still more toned back, I guess. I don't know the way to put it, but it seems as though that maybe someone, when they were made the original with the Stick of Truth, someone in the offices for the developers of this game just went, okay, guys, when you're making this game, tone it down. And definitely the game is a lot harder. This game ain't taking... It is easily a lot harder and so much more refined than the previous game, with the previously mentioned combat. Honestly, I didn't write much about this game in my script, and I don't think I have too much more to say about it either, because it's just really good, to be honest. It just has a good level of quality to it. I don't really, as I said, have much more to say. But yeah, this game is definitely still worth a look, and it's worth a try, even if you're not the biggest fan of the show. You know, when you do best and worst games of the year lists, well, I haven't done worst, but in this case, in best lists, it's very easy to spot a lot of games. Great games stand out because they're great, and bad games stand out because they're awful. However, it's hard. Then there does come either a midsection of games where there's just such a level of being average that you don't know where to place it. And then there's games like Middle-earth: Shadow of War. This hurts to put so low on the list. I'm not even joking when I say that. Rewind to Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, and if I was to do a list of some of my favourite games ever made, that would be near the top of the list, and I'm not even joking. I love that game so much. Shadow of War carries over very similar gameplay mechanics, very similar ways of, pretty much very much the same enemies and so on and so forth, but it just... The gameplay sometimes feels a little bit more awkward than the previous game. It doesn't feel as good, and not having as much innovation certainly doesn't help. But one of the main things I think about this game is the fact that it's a game of two halves. I loved the first half, all the way up to the final boss against Sauron, and there's so many great moments along the way. The arena battle, the storm of Minas Ithil turning it into Minas Morgul, riding drakes, fighting the Balrog, fighting against the particular special Nazgul of Suladan, Helm Hammerhead, and of course Isildur. And then Talion actually becoming a Nazgul himself and having to take back Minas Morgul and fighting the Witch King. There's so many great moments riding up to the end of the game. And then there's the Shadow Wars. I made 2 videos on it for a good reason. Because in this game, where you may have seen quite a lot of, there's been fortress capturing. Imagine doing nothing but fortress capturing for 10 acts. So that's the equivalent at least of 1 siege per at a minimum it's 1 siege per act. I believe it goes up from 2, maybe it starts at about 2 sieges. By the time you're at the end of the game, it's 4. The final one is 4, and it just takes forever to get there. And the Uruks power up so much in between the end of the game and the Shadow Wars that you're not prepared for it. And then it just goes on forever, and it just will never end. No, Talion, just make a game that's consistently good, please. Seriously, I wanted to love this game so much. I thought this was going... Well, the moment this was announced, I thought, yeah, that's my game of the year, right there. It's settled. And no, because it just was few of so many small little faults here and there that I just couldn't ignore. And the fact is, I'm not going to pretend a game is perfect when there's obvious faults. I did say earlier that it hurt when a game was so good in 2014. What was it? The predecessor, Shadow of Mordor, and then its successor, its sequel, that is supposed to be, you know, better, improved upon, which it is in the gameplay, the graphics, the enemy types, and the way that you actually fight them. That's better. But what isn't better is the overall quality of the game, because Shadow of Mordor keeps a consistent quality at very high. There's a few drops off here and there with the boss battles, which are awful in that game and are much better in this game, but it doesn't matter. Realistically, throughout the whole of it, if this still is this disappointing at the end, if it's so inconsistent throughout the game. I think for the sake of my sanity and the sake of everything else, I'm going to move on from this game before I want to flip out. And another game that I didn't expect to make the list, MotoGP 17. If you've been watching the real-life MotoGP season, you'd know we've had a pretty good season. The fight between Ducati and Honda for once, with Yamaha just lagging behind, Dovi versus Marquez all the way up to the line, and that eventual Lorenzo betrayal, almost, in Valencia. Luckily, this franchise hasn't fallen into the trap of becoming formulaic and not changing a lot from year to year, something like FIFA or, you know, a Forza. But even still, I skipped last year's game. I don't know why, but I just didn't play it. I just don't think I got around to it. I don't think I had the time. But all I do know is that this game is easily one of my favourite packages from Milestone. You may remember I made a series on the managerial career mode. There's now a playlist available for that. In this, you can run all 3 categories of all of the bike chassis from the different categories. And then there's just so much depth to it, with facilities you can run to give you credits bonuses, reduce management costs, improve your rider ability, and there's so much you can do in it. It doesn't feel like it gets rushed. However, the one big problem with this is the balance and the difficulty, I'd say. When you start out, you're really going to be starting out on a very slow bike, mainly the Moto3 Mahindra, which is what I started with. And yeah, it's stupidly slow. But once you start winning in Moto3, and once you start particularly winning in Moto2, the game is stupidly easy. You get so much money that you're able to upgrade the bikes and buy new ones as just in an instant. And it just feels as though it's a little bit too easy at that point, because you just run through it all. Obviously, that depends on whether or not you're winning or not, but once you go into Moto2, it's most likely you're going to try and get the fastest bike, which is the Kalex, and if not, the KTM, I believe, which is the second fastest. And then from there, you win in Moto2, you get enough money to get a good bike in MotoGP, which is I got the Ducati chassis straight away. The fact is, it's just a little bit too easy once you do break out of that early, out of the early window as such. But I'd still say it's a lot of fun. And one thing that definitely makes this game a lot more interesting, and I think definitely shows other games how to do it properly, is the classic bikes. I swear, the amount of bikes here is enough to put F1's classic content to shame, with bikes from the 125, 250 and 500cc all on 2 strokes, and classic 4-stroke bikes. A lot of the riders, I'll admit, I don't know, but realistically the ones that I noticed the most are the early bikes of Valentino Rossi, and then you have the legends of MotoGP. That's it, Wayne Gardner, Alex Criville, Mick Doohan, Eddie Lawson, Alex Barros, Kevin Schwantz, Wayne Rainey, and then some early bikes from Valentino Rossi, Max Biaggi, Loris Capirossi, if I can speak, Carlos Checa. There's just so many, and it never ends. More from Alex Barros. Realistically, this is how classic content should be done. There's no old tracks to go along with it, which I think is a shame, but there are also no classic tracks to go along in the Formula 1 game, so what are you going to do? But the fact is, this game has some fantastic handling physics, some fantastic AI, some of the best I've ever had in recent racing games, and it's just so much fun. Definitely give this one a shot. I'm interested to see what you all think of these next few games on the list. Starting off at number 6, we have Destiny 2. This is pretty damn good. It takes the original Destiny's gameplay, removes some of the stupid missions and some of the stupid things within them, like having to wait around while your ghost searches for something in files. It adds in a whole load of spectacular visuals, with segments in vehicles, and some incredible music. I know that so many games have action-based music to try and hype up the player to get them almost just panicky or just generally hyped up for a particular section in the game. But when these are done well, you can't ignore them. Dark Souls, Binding of Isaac has some pretty good music, and this is another one. And not even mentioning the story. Within the first few missions of this game, there is more story than there probably is in the entirety of Destiny 1. I played for this game on my channel, so if you want to watch any of the moments from the story, you can go and watch them. But to sum it up quickly, a section of the Cabal called the Red Legion turn up and destroy the original hub area you had on the Traveller. Gets destroyed, Cabal everywhere, and there's no sign of them slowing down. Eventually, the Traveller itself gets taken over by a giant machine, draining the power of the light, and instead seeming to capture it for the main villain, Dominus Ghaul. After which your ghost loses its power, and you get smacked around like nothing, after which falling for a very long time, waking up with hardly any power, and the story goes from there, you regain the light, so on and so forth. There's a lot to talk about, but just to go to the end point, you end up fighting Ghaul on a spectacular final locale, just staring down the machine, and the visuals look spectacular when you get there. However, it's not all good news, because this game was originally about number 4, maybe number 5. But there's the thing that dropped it to number 6 was the first expansion, The Curse of Osiris. Not to say this is the worst piece of DLC ever, or an expansion or stuff like that. It starts off with some decent scenes of a new guardian by the name of Osiris and his ghost Sagira, jumping through time and seeing the Vex have a counter somehow to them freezing time, I guess. Of which they're running their own simulation, and it's a long, old, complicated story. After which Sagira is thrown out of Mercury, the people at the Traveller find him, and it goes on from there. But honestly, there's a load of filler missions, it feels like, loads of stuff that doesn't need to happen. Honestly, this DLC could easily have been maybe 3 or 4 missions, well, maybe 3 missions long, I'd say. And instead it's 6, I think it was, maybe. But everything in between is the standard gameplay of Destiny, which is definitely saying something good, and an intimidating looking villain by the name of Panoptes. Suddenly he doesn't get any proper build-up like Ghaul did, but, you know, he still looks cool. After which it gets to the final boss, and it's a load of... Seriously, all you do is kill the normal enemies before getting out charges, shooting his eye for a bit, and then you win. Congrats, DLC over. Seriously, it's awful. I ranted about it enough in the video, I've ranted about it on my own for enough, and I'm going to let it out again, because seriously, I can't think of another boss like this in a game, even though it should be pretty easy to find. So leave your examples in the comments if you want, but seriously, this grinded my gears so much. After a decent fight, I guess we'll go with some interesting mechanics, we get this for the DLC. Awful. Just no good. It doesn't ruin the game, but as I said, it did lower itself from 4th to 6th. But yeah, fantastic gameplay, spectacular visuals, a much better story than the original one, and we've still got one more expansion to go, so hopefully it can redeem itself later. And number 5, the game everyone won't stop calling the 2D Dark Souls for cartoony platforming style games. Well, I don't think they quite hit it there. I believe it's not 2D Dark Souls, it's a 2D living nightmare. In terms of difficulty, this is probably one of the hardest games I have ever played, harder than the original Dark Souls, and harder than Bloodborne. And there's a lot of discussion as to why it's so difficult, and it's a long discussion that you could probably make an entire video out of, but just to give a quick analysis of it, I honestly think it's due to the amount of hit points you have. In games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, you always have healing, so you can recover, even when you're on the brink of death. When you get brought down to 1 hit point in this game, you just have the blinking light and more tension. Because if you mess this up, you start everything all over again, just like the Souls games. And honestly, the hardest parts of this game were some of the bosses that completely annoyed me to holy hell. Stuff like the plant in the first isle, the dragon in the second, and then Mr. King Dice. There's a lot of things to be said about you. But honestly, what I think was harder than those was some of the run and gun stages. Screw these. Tons of enemies, loads of projectiles, and I'm done. But honestly, the controls make up for it. They're not the easiest to get used to, and there is a lot of complexity to it. But when you do, the reward from them is astonishing. But one of the biggest draws for me and for a load of other people was that this is one of the best looking, sounding and playing games that you will ever play in your life. And actually, while I would just bring it up, can I bring up the music for a second? It's one of the coolest sounding in all of gaming, and it's so refreshing to hear. Since so many games, like I just mentioned with Destiny 2, go for intense soundtracks. that put the players on the edge and nervous pretty much, to the point where they want them to make a mistake. This game just has a sense of, it's not obviously trying to get you on the edge, but it's more, it tries almost, I think, to put you off, because the game is so inviting with its art style and the sound behind it, that by the time you get into it and you realise what it does, oh, you're in for a big, big shock. Honestly, the soundtrack is gorgeous. Go and listen to it on your own time. Every boss theme, run and gun stage, and my particular favourite.
No, I cannot let you pass. Don't you mess with me. Don't mess with King Kyle. Don't mess with me. Don't mess with King Kyle. Don't mess with me.
Is all fantastic. But seriously, if I have to fight that dragon or King Dice again, I'm going to pull my hair out and just... So, moving on from a new IP, which just stole the hearts of everyone, to a franchise that continues to grow from year to year. The number 4 game on my list is F1 2017, if you couldn't figure it out already. Honestly, I love this game. I really do. There's no other way of putting it. The game is fantastic in the way it is. In essence, take F1 2016, give it a more refined handling model, put the cars up to 2017 spec, add the speed, add classic cars, and put career mode on steroids, as well as the AI, and voila! We have the best package that Codemasters has ever put together for a Formula 1 game. The thing that really is fantastic in this game has to be some of the smaller details, like mechanical wear to the components that you have to manage for an entire season as well as race to race. So you can't just drive like a maniac 24/7 like you do in the other games. But one of the biggest things in this game has to be the AI. After so many games, particularly Forza, continuing its idea of drivatars instead of just normal AI, it's good to see that everyone else is just sticking with the classic AI and getting them better than ever. But there'll be a little bit more on that later. But I also love how the classic cars are used within the career mode. Instead of them just being a separate part that have their own game modes and having no connection to the rest of the game, they're integrated into the career mode. Simple as can be. And you get to drive them with specific objectives that then benefit you in the career mode. It's a win-win situation. But the fact is, it's the, as said, best package that Codemasters have ever put together for a Formula 1 game, and I'm more than happy for this to continue on the way that it is. You have to think, if this is what they can do in 2017, is there more to come in 2018? I can only hope so. I can only hope that from here until the end, until Codemasters, I don't know, stop making the F1 games, or the license gets taken away, that they just continue to make games better and better from here on out. And at number 3, the game that I am most interested to see where it lands on the list for you guys, Life is Strange Before the Storm. Yes, nothing here tests your gaming skill to the absolute maximum. It's not the best looking game in the world, but I'm not going to lie. I love the Life is Strange universe, and Before the Storm continues to add to it. Not even mentioning the fact that there is another episode coming in February next year, and overall you have a very solid package indeed. I feel as though the best way that I'm going to be able to talk about this game is to break each episode down. So let's begin with episode 1. Well, what else did you expect? This honestly is going to feel like a weird sentence to say, but the first episode isn't the most exciting to talk about, and it's probably, relatively speaking, the most tame of all the episodes. Which, considering this happens in the opening location, shot, is quite a testament to how crazy the rest of this game can really get. But on the episode itself, I'd say it's decently well done. It serves its purpose. It's a great intro, with some already starting to try and pull the strings of the player to get them thinking. And in this game, we're the ones controlling Chloe, with some returning faces including Joyce, Frank, David, and some new faces like one Rachel Amber. May have heard of her in the Life is Strange universe. But we do also get some very much unknown characters before. One, Damon Merrick. Lots of people... Honestly, when this game came out, he was probably the second biggest mystery. But more on that in a minute. But honestly, this guy was talked about so much at the mill by Frank and the people around him. And he seems to be a bit of a powerhouse within the current timeline we're in.
Damon Merrick? I see you've heard of him.
you actually get no introduction to him, and you don't know if you've met him or not, unless you play the episodes and you know his face. But even though it's the first episode and I did say it's rather tame, it doesn't mind showing its bringing in a big curveball to everything. After a day of getting out of school with Rachel and Chloe, they end up going to an overpass where they can look at they have a look at the entire of the Arcadia Bay Park area, and eventually you see two people, and you see them kiss in front of you, getting Rachel to be rather upset. So clearly something annoys her. Well, one of those people was one of her parents, the dad. The other was still unknown at this point. She became one of the biggest mysteries of this entire game. But again, spoilers for the rest of the video. But yeah, after that happens, it's clear that it very much upsets her, and you end up going to an old tree in the night after a big old fight, and she makes her feelings abundantly clear. The episode concludes with that huge fire being started in the park, and it more or less becomes it's not really too important to the rest of the game, but it more just hangs around as a massive consequence as such, as something that you couldn't change. It's always looming in the background as a reminder, this happened. And also, her again. But it's time to move on. That moment, that's all you need to know. Episode 2 review over, and prize confirmed. Alright, that's not all the episode has to offer, but it's hard to ignore it. Whether you're a fan of it, or even ship the whole thing, it's just hard to ignore, okay? You know what else is hard to ignore? The fact that this episode is probably one of my favourite from the Life is Strange games. Counting the previous moment, there's so many other fantastic moments in this, to be honest. This just makes it overall really good. It's entertaining. It has some big twists. It goes dark whenever it needs to.
Fucking money! You don't have to hit me, man. I'm gonna...
Where is it?
Please, just give me 1 week.
You're just going to lie there? I thought football players were supposed to be tough. Sorry to have to do this, kid. No one steals from me. No one.
And we start unraveling the mysteries from episode 1. The identity of her, the actual face and voice and everything connected to Damon Merrick, and quite a few other things in between, leading up to that huge one at the end, but, you know, spoilers. This episode does its best to pump everything up for the finale, and I'll tell you what, it does a fantastic job of it. Everything from the heated discussion you can have in Wells's office, to the idea that you're now starting to get involved with Frank and Damon and all their money problems. And also the Tempest. That's a pretty big moment, you know? And also, Pompadour as a puppy. No, don't do it. I'll not be tempted by your cute... God damn it, look at him, he's too cute. And compose. So, the episode just has a fantastic mix of the high-running emotions and the moments that become shocks. I didn't mention these in the first episode, but there are some dream sequences sometimes, and these can be anywhere from a bit thought-provoking to a bit of a general thing, to going extremely dark, long story behind that one, and this one, well, considering that William, Chloe's dad, is Two-Face, yeah, I'd say we're on the weird side of things again. But just to sum it up, this episode puts all of the pieces in place for the finale, and it does a damn good job of doing so.
Rachel, that woman you saw, that wasn't my mistress. That was your mother.
Honestly, seeing the trailer for this episode was enough to make me glued to the screen and eagerly anticipating the finale to this game. Damon finally becoming a true threat, Rachel in true trouble, and the beginning of the blue hair for Chloe. Yeah, the fan base gets excited by the smallest things. So how is the episode itself? Well, as a final episode should be. It's utterly crazy from start to finish. legitimately never stops in its energy and its constant just things happening. And it decided to take all of its restraints off, with James coming clean about his story with Sarah, Rachel showing a more vulnerable side to herself, and oh yeah, but a million other things that happened in this episode. Seriously, there's so much that happens, I'm not quite sure where to start. But I think I'm going to start in the junkyard. If you've played this episode, you know exactly where this is going. But after fixing up the truck, giving it a quick drive around, and Rachel showing up, they meet up with Frank and Damon. Now, whatever choices you make during this part, it all leads to the same ending. Rachel gets annoyed at what Damon continues to say, smacks him over the head with a large piece of wood, and then... Yep, he stabs her. I knew from the trailers that something was going to go wrong, but I could have never predicted that one. After a trip to the hospital, we set out once more trying to find Sarah, eventually leading to one final showdown in the mill against Damon, of which you can do a little bit of fighting with, but eventually Frank shows up and ends him, I can assume. After eventually waking up from a concussion, you turn up and have a talk with Sarah, after which he says to hide the truth from Rachel and to hide any of the things that you've learned about, with actually a quick visit to the office before learning that James was associated with a lot of things that Damon Merrick was doing, particularly trying to keep Rachel safe. And whichever, you then have that one final decision: tell her the truth or hide it. Now, honestly, this is where my problems with the episode begin. Legitimately, none of the problems happen. Apart from the intro, where it does the whole recap, where I guess it's a little bit lacking detail, and one of the scenes is mirrored for some reason. But the endings to this are awful. Well, maybe not awful, maybe that's an overstatement, but they're not good by any stretch of the imagination. If you pick Tell Rachel the Truth, there is no dialogue for the rest of the episode. That's it. That's where the dialogue ends, right before the choice, because everything goes silent to that and falls into music. And if you choose to hide the truth, there's a little bit more, but realistically, that to me does, I don't know. In the actual playthrough, I decided to tell the truth, and I don't know, it's such a hard decision to make in the end, but it doesn't matter, because it hardly changes anything. It changes one cutscene, and admittedly your morality may be a bit shaken up, but even still, it changes one cutscene. You can change another by getting Sarah to meet up with Rachel, by which you have to give up the best choice in episode 2. After that, there's a bit of a quick montage showcasing Chloe and Rachel through the years, leading up to technically the beginning of the first Life is Strange, ending in the dark room, with a shutter going off in the background, taking pictures, with just having the camera focusing on a ringing phone that's never being picked up. But the fact is, why would you end it on that? I like to use this quote when talking about a lot of things. Just because you know how something ends doesn't mean you can't enjoy the journey or the ride to go along with it. But not this time. You go along the whole montage, having a fantastic time, and you could have ended it there on a lovely shot of the lighthouse. Going up, fading to black, that could have been it. But no. You had to remind us, after all this, oh yeah, she's dead, by the way. Remember that. I mean, if I bring the first game up, for example, those endings were not good either. But at least they somewhat gave you clarity. These ones just lead into the events of the first game. I mean, that's typical of a prequel maybe to do, but even still, it's just unsatisfying. And again, the first ones weren't either, but they had a decent ending, and not to mention the music choice. With the Sacrifice Arcadia Bay ending having Obstacles by Sid Matters, the song was used at the ending of episode 1, so that was a bit of a throwback, if you will, to the very first episode that would have been released a very long time before that. And the other, with the Sacrifice Chloe ending, Spanish Sahara by Foals, is just such a fantastic song that was used in that time. I don't know what song they used for the ending, but it just seems a little bit meh in comparison. Overall, it's a great episode, but just squanders at the finish line. And to speak overall on Before the Storm, as a whole I enjoyed the experience. I liked they introduced us to Rachel and the massive step up with the animation. Because let's be real, as much as we all love the original Life is Strange, the animation was below par, to be kind. However, the reduction from 5 episodes to 3, and the huge quality gap in the writing ways between episodes 1 and the other 2 is massive. Seriously, watch one and then 2 or 3. The gap in just the pacing of the dialogue is fantastic, but the fact that they took several steps forward, maybe a few back, and it still ended up at number 3 on the list, is just an omen to how good this universe can be, and how much it can immerse you, and to be honest, to just how much of an outright charm these games have. Wow, things have really started to pick up in this latter end of the list. And so, at number 2, my choice is Need for Speed Payback. Just running as the runner-up in the overall, but it wins best racing game of 2017. Whereas games like Gran Turismo and Forza have a problem of being high in their overall build, but lacking any kind... They lack charm, pretty much, is what they do. And Dirt 4 and F1 2017 having the charm, but not quite the quality. F1 was probably the closest it got. Need for Speed Payback, for me, has the absolute perfect line between it. It took me so long to figure out what I love about this game, and there was definitely a few things. Number 1, it doesn't half-ass progression. There's a long old debate to be had about progression in racing games and games in general, but Forza is a big insult towards it. I don't know if I've talked about it properly in a video, but if you want me to talk about that, then I'm going to be more than happy to do so. But overall, this game just gets progression so much better than the other games, and not to mention some fantastic handling physics, at least in my personal opinion. And one of the big things that I think does give it its charm is the fact that you have 3 actual characters with, while not the best storytelling, it certainly just gives it more... It makes Need for Speed Payback its own game, and it doesn't make it formulaic. Seriously, take a Forza or a Gran Turismo, take the names off them, and if you just applied that and it was just any old racing game, then it could pretty much fit into that category perfectly. I'm sorry to say, as much as I love the Gran Turismo handling model, as much as Forza has made good games in the past and the quality is still somewhat there, Gran Turismo didn't have much to offer and Forza is slipping. But Need for Speed has come back. In 2015, Need for Speed gave us the reboot to the series after... Oh god, please. No, don't remind me. And they definitely came back with a decent game, I guess. It wasn't the greatest, though. But this one just feels so much better. It's just the fact that how much depth it has, how much more effort is put into this. The bigger map, stupid amounts of events, and even some big main missions that involve you doing heist stuff. No, wrong type of heist. There's no killing in this game. But honestly, I'd say that the only thing that I don't like about... There's a few things I don't like about this game, which did keep it from the number 1 spot. I don't like the off-road events. They honestly, I think they're horrible. Which I guess, since it's the first time it's been on Need for Speed, is somewhat acceptable, and it could do with a lot of fine-tuning. And the ending is lackluster. If it's built up to more DLC and some maybe an extra story stuff, then to be honest, that's a little bit, I don't know. Then you have the whole debate of season passes and blah blah blah, so on and so forth. But honestly, overall, I'm going to be more than happy if they do bring some more story to this game, because to be honest, I can't wait to get right back into this game and playing some more. Need for Speed Payback, the best racing game of 2017. But the best game, in my personal opinion, of 2017 is... Assassin's Creed Origins. Not something that I thought I'd even be playing this year, let alone be topping this list. When I heard Assassin's Creed was coming back in 2017, I was somewhat interested, I guess. Not that much. I'd liked the games before, like Syndicate and Black Flag, but they weren't brilliant. They were alright games. Then I heard that one of the big things that was overhauled for the return was the combat system. My curiosity got higher. Then I saw gameplay of it. It got higher, then I played it, and I love it, and it's my top game of 2017. Honestly, if I wanted to, I'd leave it right there and stop the video right now. But I'm not. Basically, the combat system had a massive overhaul, mixing in light and heavy attacks with overpowering attacks that get charged over time. And then you even have boss battles in between that force you to switch up your combat style through the middle of it and have to just alter it all the time, and you're always kept on your toes. And the game is legitimately difficult, and I could go on for a very long time, but it's just so good in my opinion. And the map? Holy hell. The map is on another level. In terms of size, I'm pretty sure this is one of the biggest games I've seen in a while. You have so much of Egypt to explore, with so many of the famous locations like the Sphinx and the Pyramids of Giza. Honestly, there's a few things that do let this game down. I guess the story isn't that good on look back. It's kind of a bit formulaic and a bit messy. But realistically, the story isn't what I'm looking for here. What I look at when I play this game is the gameplay itself. And honestly, this game might just have some of the best gameplay that I have played in a very long time. Finding a middle ground where the game is challenging enough, but is also still very much a lot of fun to play. You'll encounter so many different enemy types that do require you to take them down differently, although you will kind of get the counter to them eventually, and then it will become, I guess, a little bit easier. But even still, if you walk into a fortress or an outpost, and there are tons and tons of enemies, get ready for the fight of your life. And I did touch briefly on the boss battles, and there was a couple that I recorded. One, I can't remember their names, so do excuse me, but one of them was a bit more of a, I guess, a bit more of a tactical boss fight, because you had one person holding the Apple of Eden, using it to control himself and I guess some soldiers of his, and teleporting around the little area where you fight, and then he calls in these minions, and it just goes on and on. It is a fantastically... It's well designed, I guess, but it's just not the best boss fight in all of existence, but it's very good, I've got to say. And the other one is definitely much more better, in my opinion. You get an outright punching war between yourself and your opponent in a massive gladiator-style arena, and it is a melee death to the... It is a melee fight to the absolute death. There's nothing else to be said about it. And honestly, the controls for this are pretty fantastic. Because there's a lot of the time where I felt in the previous games, you almost couldn't fall down in these games where you're kind of platforming around and parkouring. But in this game, it feels a lot more open, feels a lot more free. The fact that it gives you more control and the fact that you can mess up. The climb up the Pyramids of Giza, again, if that's how you say it, give me a good reminder of that. Seriously, screw that. That's difficult. I said I didn't want to touch too much on the story because, well, one, spoilers, and two, it wasn't that big of a thing for me, but I guess I will a little bit. Mainly for the game, you play as Bayek, the Medjay of Egypt, and you also have his wife, Aya. You'll play as both throughout the whole game, and realistically, it's a revenge plot style thing where Bayek tries to get revenge for the people who killed his son, and it goes from there on out. And it's just it is handled very well, though. Not to mention that I think the setting that they used for Egypt is beautiful. When you get to a wide open expanse of just desert, it just goes on and on for miles, and it is gorgeous to look at. Even as much as it is pretty empty. Honestly, there's so much more I could say about this game, but I'm going to sum it up quickly. Back in early November, I picked up myself the Xbox One X, and I played that for quite a while to kind of like test a load of games, see what it looked like with the 4K stuff, and then I went back to the PlayStation 4 to finish off Assassin's Creed Origins, and I could just tell, I could feel on my face that I just had the biggest grin, the biggest and silliest grin throughout the entire thing. I was so happy playing this game, and that, I think, at its core, is what I ranked these games by. How much of a smile it gave me while playing it, or how good it made me feel. Realistically, I tried to keep the technical side out of it, unless again controls awfully, but mostly it is just gut instinct when I'm ranking these. And in my personal opinion, Assassin's Creed Origins is my favourite game of 2017. So everyone, thank you very much for watching this list. It's been a long old video, I do understand that, so I won't blame you if you've skipped through to the end or just saw the choices. But if you did watch all the way through, then please leave me some suggestions on anything I could do differently. And if you have your own opinions on games that were released this year, then please do leave them in the comments. And I know there was some games that I didn't put on this list, like Horizon Zero Dawn, which is a fantastic game, but honestly I just didn't play it that much. So if you have any games that you think should have been on this list, or to just completely try and disprove you on a game, then I'm all open for it. I'm all open to hear some opinions. But other than that, thank you so much as well for 2017, because this is the last video I'm uploading for this year. Thank you for everything, and it's time to start fresh in 2018. I'll see you then, guys, and goodbye.
Look what you done.